I'm Brad Frost, and I am a design system consultant and front-end developer based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the US. And what I care about in the sort of professional realm is, I think, sort of helping people make better web stuff is the sort of broad strokes of it. And increasingly that sort of takes the form of kind of creating design systems to kind of bake in a lot of sort of front end and UX and design and brand and accessibility best practices kind of into a reusable set of components that other teams can sort of reach for and use and kind of get more stuff for free. And so that's been a lot of my professional focus over the last coming up on a decade. But it really, I'm of the like Zeldman school of web standards and all of that, a very, very big believer in the web and the promise of the web. And that sort of translates to, helping more people access the web and have better experiences. So that's kind of been my MO for my whole career, and as it's sort of shifted and taken many forms. But yeah, so that's a bit of what I care about.
How do you personally go about explaining the importance of online accessibility to someone who never even considered it?
My perspective is one of, again, just kind of, we'll say old school web, like W3C, like let's make the web a better place. And I think that sort of spirit, as it sort of translates to accessibility, has always been, let's make sure that more people can access our stuff, like irrespective of their ability, their context, where they live, that what kind of network they're on, like it just anything. It's more about sort of, again, making that sort of promise of the web more a reality. And so I see sort of accessibility as kind of part of that umbrella. And so as such, and it's been really, I've learned a lot over the years, working with different accessibility consultants and, people with disabilities themselves. And I obviously appreciate like that perspective. And it matches quite nicely, it sort of maps quite nicely to sort of like how I see things philosophically, I guess. But yeah, so that's a bit my perspective is one of somebody who cares in theory and tries to keep an open mind and open ears and read a lot from people where this isn't just a nice idea, but this is really mission critical.
How do you think the internet or the web will change over the next 10 years, and what specific features or habits that exist now do you hope will be seen as from their time?
There's some pretty giant, we'll say, macro level and cultural, sort of things that I will table for this conversation, because we could get into the future of the internet
exactly. It's a podcast in its own right.
Terrifying. But let's just say that there is still web design as it presently stands, it operating. We're all still sort of making things with HTML and CSS and JavaScript 10 years from now, which I think is a pretty safe bet. And what I would like to see, I have no idea if this is going to come to fruition, but I can sort of like tell you what I'd like to see, especially with my sort of focus on building design systems, is what I see the world over. I've ducked my head into a bunch of different organizations. I see how teams create things and build things. And my God, there is just so much waste. There's just so much wasted time, effort, talent on recreating the same crap over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, I'm working on building a date picker, and I would love 10 years from now for that to be remember when we used to make custom date pickers, in the same way that, going back another 10 years, it's like, remember when we used to sort of slice out little rounded corners in Photoshop and bounce those out and then sort of position those against a button in order around the corners. Like it just seems utterly and completely foolish to not just have these things built into the browser. And truthfully, like as it pertains to accessibility, there are just so many things that ought to be a part of the web platform. I mean, it is, you see just the tragedy that is, you know, whatever, every single website not being accessible, having all these sort of critical accessibility issues. And while on one hand, you could shake your fist at individual developers, that's not the issue. The issue is that we need the actual what's provided, what comes out of the box to developers to just have this stuff baked into it. I also think that it's important for the tools and the landscape to change. One thing that we'll say might be a little controversial, but from where I sit, a lot of times it's, oh, great, here's this new thing, you can use it, this is good, but oh, it doesn't work in you know, JAWS this version or whatever. And it's like, it gets talked about like that's an immovable thing, where it's like, oh, well, like people can't update their devices as much, you know, it's like, and that's fully appreciated, like they're sort of like tethered, especially with like a lot of the sort of assistive technologies. But let's change that. Like, let's like fast forward 10 years, like every single piece of software in my room and throughout my house has some form of like auto update feature. And it's like, we need to, for these like very basic level things, like we need to get on a better path where it's like the tools, the landscape, that everything is just more accessible, roll out, you know, changes can happen easier and stuff like that. And I don't know what that translates to. I'm not like kind of like a part of that like landscape, but I guess what I get irked by is that so much of like this burden of you need to care about this, and oh, individual web developer of the world, you're not being considerate enough because like you are, you know, sort of doing all these things. And it's like, let's change the baseline. Let's change like the tools that are available in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Let's change the baseline for the sort of device landscape, the assistive technology landscape, the everything landscape, and just kind of move a lot of that stuff and remove those sort of responsibilities from individuals, and just kind of have more of that stuff just kind of baked into, you know, the landscape that we're traveling over. Last thing to say is, like, to be clear, I'm not trying to like abdicate like responsibility or wash it like, this isn't like a concern of individual. Of course we need to do that stuff, but it's like it is a both and kind of thing. And I think that I kind of equate it to like recycling a little bit, where there's this kind of undue responsibility put on individuals. When you like look at the whole system, you're like, well, it's, you know, upstream, it's like these bigger things that actually matter more, but yet we are being sort of blasted time and time again, reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's like, not saying we shouldn't do that as individuals, but like, let's change the system.
If you're with someone who needs to check how accessible their website is, but only has 5 minutes, or it might be someone that wants to understand it more, talk us through how you'd go about showing them.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is just tabbing through on a keyboard. That's far and away the biggest thing. In my work as a design system consultant, I come in and audit and do technical evaluations of design systems and, you know, the products that are built using design systems, or sort of target applications that would use the design system. And that's like the first thing I do. Like I don't look at the markup, I don't look at code, I don't look at anything. I just kind of go and I just start tabbing around, and, you know, 8 times out of 10, I don't know where I am. And that's so that to me is just like the quickest and easiest way, and just also most obvious. It's like, you know, as a non-technical person, you can just be like, go here, hit the tab key, you should be able to, you know, hit enter or something to you know, trigger the menu or whatever. But just go, you know, have a go, try to get to this, you know, try to get this product to click into it or something like that using your keyboard. And that it's just a very visceral and understandable way of comprehending it.
In terms, we spoke to this a little bit when we talked about the next 10 years, but in terms of the adoption of accessible digital products, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing us?
We did touch on this a little bit. There's like a lack of, sort of native elements, or those native elements that do exist are sort of incomplete or have rough edges or whatever, and those need to be smoothed out. I'll say that the sort of like bigger task, or it's complementary and related to that, is just the sort of general sense of design systems in general. Like it's most organizations I work with are in various stages of creating and adopting a design system, or so like looking up to us to help with that. And what that means from a product and like sort of like a website and web app perspective is that the current state of it really is by and large a plate of spaghetti. It's just like a big tangled mess. Every form is bespoke. There's not shared, sort of markup. There's not shared kind of components being used. And so I see the adoption of better accessibility practices, as part of the adopting a design system sort of vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And so coming back to this sort of 10 years on kind of thing, if you sort of fast forward, let's say a design system is successful, right? What that translates to is your websites and apps that can be powered by these sort of consumable, front end components will have those accessibility features sort of hopefully baked into them. But also, if there are bugs, if there are deficiencies or whatever, you fix those in one place, and then sort of that propagates out to all these different places.
What is the one thing that every single person can do or learn to play a part in a progression towards a more accessible web?
Exhibit empathy. I won't sort of go into like, I think a technical thing. I think it really has a lot to do with just kind of just when you find yourself second guessing, like, is this really important? Like, you still hear plenty of that sentiment, I think, around. It's like, that sounds hard, or that sounds whatever. What's really happening there is your alarm bells are going off and saying like more work or responsibility or obligation is being put on your shoulders, and people push back against that, which is understandable. You know what I mean? Like that's a very human thing. It's like, like that sounds like more work. I don't want to do more work. But at the same time, I think that empathy is a critical tool of kind of cutting through a lot of that, and to kind of really take a step back and consider who our work is for.
Yeah.
That we are building things for other people to use, and that is really critical. Again, to manifest the promise of the web, but to also, even from a capitalistic perspective, reach more customers and do all of that stuff. So it's like I think that it is important to really sort of take a step back and go, oh, some people, are visiting our site like this. Some people are visiting our site like this, and it's our job to accommodate that and to really sort of understand that, and say, yes, that is an important thing.